Welcome, members, to this video program for our members only as part of the Online Vault. We're thrilled to have you here. I, of course, am Todd Lewis with Charles Lewis Photography, joined by these two fantastic gentlemen, Tom Morelli and Charles Lewis. Welcome, gentlemen. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hey, all right. Well, let's dive in because today we get to talk about photography. Each month now we're trying to do a video on photography techniques and a separate video on the business side as well, because both of them are very important to the success of your photography business. Today we are talking about off-camera flash, how it's ruining so many photographs and how to make it work for you instead of against you. A great subject. Tom, this was one of the subjects I think you had suggested a little while back, something you get asked a lot of questions about. You know that there are a lot of photographers out there that have questions about this. What was it that sparked the idea for you to want to cover this in today's issue?
You know, I've been using off-camera flash from 25, 30 years ago when film days occurred. But a lot of times today with the digital age, a lot of people are just kind of point and photograph. They let the camera do the work. But available light doesn't always work. And if you want to have work that is a little better or a lot better than what your clients or prospects can do at home, you really need to learn techniques that elevate yours to that next level so it catches people's attention. It's not just your photography that'll make your success, but this will give you that edge over people that don't know how to do this. I know there's a lot of photographers out there that talk about, I'm just available light. Well, available light's wonderful, and if you know how to use it, and I use it sometimes, and that's it, but most of the time, it can really be helped by just a little bit of off-camera flash. We're going to talk about that today and how much can be too much and how much is not enough.
For sure. And so the question you should be asking yourself is why listen to us? Tom just gave you an idea of why you should listen to him. I'm going to tell you right now, don't listen to me about this. This is one of the few subjects in photography that I don't have experience with other than assisting my father, because I'm a cinematographer. And in cinematography, you're not using off-camera flash. You're using off-camera lighting, of course, but you're not using off-camera flash. So I'm not going to have a lot to contribute here, but I'm going to be listening very, very closely. But listen to these two gentlemen below me here. Dad, why should they listen to what you have to say? How much over the years has off-camera flash been a part of what you do?
Oh, it's been extremely important for many, many years. Listen to this. Tom is really good at this. He doesn't overdo it. He does it just the right amount so the clients look fabulous, but he doesn't overdo it, which is a very common mistake that a lot of people make. He's really good at this. Listen carefully.
Yeah, and you want to be learning from the people that have been doing this a long time, that have the experience in the film days into the digital age and how things are similar and how they're different. Tom has, I don't know how many times that flash bulb has gone off for you, Tom, over the years, but I'm willing to bet it's in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of times. Tom knows what he's talking about when it comes to this subject. All right. Well, let's jump right in here, Tom, with the first, our first point here is off-camera flash use. Oftentimes available light just needs to be corrected, or it needs to be balanced better to be more flattering to the subject. And the flash built into many cameras is not good for this purpose. Why is it not good? We're seeing an example of it right here, Tom. Why is that? Look at the difference there. There's such a vast difference.
Which one are good? First of all, I think we need to make one qualification here. This is kind of a subset on lighting programs. This is not my studio lighting. This is not the lighting if I go to a client's home and work inside. That's a whole different series that we'll do sometime. This is totally on location, outdoors, and we're looking for that gorgeous light that's available, but then fixing what needs fixing. So most of us bought a camera at some point, in our lifetime that had the little pop-up flash, at the top. And sometimes you just put the camera on automatic and the lighting wasn't right, that pop up and it would ding. But unfortunately, because it's right at the lens location or right at the height of the subject, it blasts into their face and obviously is very unflattering. So we need to figure out a way to balance that nice ambient light with a little bit of fill in. Sometimes we use that as a main light, sometimes not, but we'll talk more about that. But the off-camera flash you just duct tape that down, close that thing, take it right off, and take it to the dentist, have him extract it. But don't use your on-camera built-in pop-up flash for professional portrait photography.
Absolutely not, because that's doing one of the worst things you can possibly do, because if it's on the camera, then the light is coming from directly where the camera is, and that's just terrible. I mean, look at the difference there again. When it's an on-camera flash, how flat that lighting is. That off-camera flash, that being the only real difference there. You can see the massive difference that makes. Plus the shadows, the shadow differences and stuff like that as well. But yeah, off camera is absolutely the way to go. All right, let's jump into, let's take a little closer look there at that photograph. See, there you can really see it. If you couldn't see it on that previous image, really get a very quick look at how very different that looks. All right, so Tom, obviously the flash needs to be powerful. There's a number of things that the flash needs to be. It needs to be powerful. It's got to be portable. Obviously, you want it to be battery operated, rechargeable. Let's talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, when I first started doing this, I used to only have portable lights that I carried like a 200-foot extension cord because I'd get to the client's home and they'd say, we want some in the backyard. And I'm like, okay, that sounds great. We talked about that. But I have to plug in somewhere, or I didn't have battery packs. This is, I'm talking 35 years ago. So as time has gone on and technology has improved, we now have far more portable units that can provide the power that we need, but also that we need batteries to run them. A lot of them have built-in batteries. A lot of them come with power packs that attach to the belt. I had that for years at weddings. Many of them, they just snap in and snap out, and they recharge separately, and then you put them into the unit itself. So there's many ways. We're really not going to delve into, there's so many different brands and types of equipment. You can explore that yourself, but the idea is that it has to be something that's DC powered, battery powered, as opposed to AC powered. And there's a ton of them available now. And the prices have come down. You can get on eBay, as we always talk about, get some really good units like this for not a ton of money, but boy, it will improve your photography.
Now, Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, but I mean, I know there are lots of different options that are out there. Can you share just kind of what model or make that you use, or at least one of them?
Yeah, well, I have a White Lightning, which is Paul Buff company. They make Alien Bees. I use Alien Bees and White Lightnings. And they have a little battery pack made by the same company called a Vagabond battery. It's just a small rechargeable battery that attaches to the light stand. It's helpful because the weight of it holds the stand in place too. It is a little bulky. I use it on a lot of locations, but if there are other alternatives we'll talk about if you're in a location where carrying that thing isn't going to be as helpful.
All right, fantastic. So, yeah, that balance between power, mobility, price, quality, all of those things have to be factors. And throughout the rest of this program, you're going to kind of find out what things to keep in mind as you're doing that. And here's a great point here, that there are LED light sources, but most of the time, and we deal with this a lot in the cinematography world as well, that oftentimes the LEDs just are not quite as powerful for a lot of outdoor applications. Talk about that a little bit, Tom.
Yeah, and I've seen some photographers, and I study this with photographers a lot, who've taken smaller ones, and in certain cases, particularly in interior situations, they can pop one of these panels in and use it to fill in some shadows and things, but they're just not that controllable as far as I'm concerned, and repeatable, and they're a little bulky to have a size that puts out enough power to really affect the image. They got to be pretty big. So, unless you have an assistant or two carrying those things around, they are better, in my opinion, to leave those to the cinematographers and that type of purpose. So if someone recommends these, they may have a small one that works for certain applications, but for what I do, I need something that's really powerful.
Absolutely. So good point there. So, keep that in mind as you're making your choices, whether you're going LED or non-LED. And especially when it comes to flash, it becomes even more of a challenge. And so here we're looking at a couple of flash units. They're small enough to be handheld, but they're a little bit less powerful. So, kind of what's your balancing act here, Tom?
Yeah, if I'm photographing an individual, a child, a high school senior, someone where I'm relatively close to them, I'm not, 50 feet away, or there's not a huge group, I can get away, especially if we're walking through the backyard of a home and it's hilly terrain. Carrying a light stand, especially if you're on your own that day, is really impossible, and the wind's going to blow it over. literally using one of these is better correctly, as we'll talk about, is better than not using anything at all. It's far better, obviously, than using that on-camera flash. So there's a dozen companies that make these. Often they're united with if you have a Canon camera, Canon makes one, Nikon makes one for Nikon, Sony, etc., that talk to both wirelessly and remote, or tethered, that will help you get great exposures through the lens exposures called TTL that really nail the exposure. But you can set them on manual too, like you do your camera. Again, we're not going to get that in depth today because that would be a 2-hour course itself. But just don't be afraid. And these are very inexpensive. You can get them for under $100, but they're not going to do a lot for you in terms of longevity. This is for taking a few photographs at a session that needs some of this fill light. That's not that powerful, and as we'll see, there's some ways to soften that up a little bit. But if you don't have any lighting at all, you can start with this and experiment and start getting good with this on your closer singles or couples, and then as you get into the bigger family groups or further away, you're going to need more power.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but something like this would probably be used quite frequently, like at weddings, like during the actual ceremony itself and stuff like that. When you've got to be very mobile and ready to get something in a moment's notice. You might have your assistant there with one of these on either just holding it up or on a light stand that they can move around quickly based on wherever you are. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll start first. And I know Chuck did so many weddings; he still dreams about them. But a lot of the units I used during wedding years were a little more powerful than this. They had a power pack on the belt, so you didn't have to change rechargeable batteries. Some of these smaller units don't have that capability, but Nikon and Canon do have power packs that often will let you do 600 or 800 charges or exposures before you have to recharge the battery. That's really what you need. So if you're going to do a wedding, these smaller units are okay maybe for part of the reception, but you really need something that's got a lot more longevity, duration, and guts, let's call it, bigger ability to put out more light.
Yeah, I remember the ones we used, Dad, where they had a pretty big battery that slid right into the handle, I think. And but anything you want to add about that, Dad?
No, I agree with everything Tom's saying.
All right, let's move on to the next key point here then. All right, next up here. So what are we looking at here, Tom? It looks like we're talking kind of diffusion here. Usually there's a way to diffuse the light source. Very important. Obviously, I can't think of any times where it would be an exception where you'd want to use a flash without some sort of diffusion on it. That just seems like it would be, unless you're going for something really high key. But how important is diffusion here?
Well, remember, lighting, when we're doing portraits, it's supposed to be soft, directional, and enhance your subject. Harsh shadows and specularity, it's called, where there's a shine on the skin or there's just a lot of light coming directly in one spot, that's very unflattering, kind of like that first set of photographs we saw with the girl's direct flash in the face. So we're trying to soften the light the best we can. Now, these are pretty minimal. There is a handheld little soft box there that you can see you can attach a flash to and handhold it. Now, that would be kind of bulky if you've got a camera in one hand and got that. But if you have an assistant, often that's a useful way to really soften the light, bring it in closer, and you emulate studio lighting, really, because it's a nice size. The little plastic dome that goes on is sort of the next step down. It's not as softening. It does reduce the power a little bit, but if you're in a location where that's the only light that you're going to be able to pop in there, that at least softens that up and turns that into a light head that kind of glows with light rather than having it directly pointed at the subject, which is not good.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so make sure you're utilizing diffusion. So important, including when you're using off-camera flash for sure. All right, next up here after the diffusion, now we're looking at kind of the larger flash units, right? Kind of the soft boxes, usually in the 32 by 32 range. When do you find yourself utilizing these, and why are these such an important part of your technical arsenal?
So these are the ones that go onto the White Lightning or the Alien Bees or whatever power unit you have that's on a light stand. So these are large enough to carry around, light enough to carry around, but large enough to give us a softer light source. So these are a little closer to your subject, often used as a key or main light, just like you would in a studio situation with the ambient light filling it in. So we need something soft and flattering and directional. Again, there are many brands and they'll fit different types of units, but they're designed for the little larger, as you can see in the photograph on the left there. There's usually a little adapter ring so you can fit it to whatever brand you have. And these are pretty reasonably priced. The shape is less important. It depends on what you want the catch light to be. There's round ones, there's octagonal ones, there's square ones. The square ones I just happen to like. I like the catch light. I like the size of it. That's where I came up with the 32 by 32. I have a bunch of these, larger and smaller, but I found that that's the most useful flattering for my single subjects or my couples outside where we try to use them as a main light source.
Excellent. All right. So next, large flash units will accept kind of small soft boxes, usually in that 32 by 32 range as you're talking here. And here you got an example of kind of a soft box positioned over and slightly to the right of the subject with the exposure based on the softbox output. So you base the exposure on the softbox output, rather than the ambient light in that area?
Yeah, with digital photography in general, and again, everyone has theories on this, I try to expose for the highlights so that we don't lose detail. Even if we're photographing in RAW, which I do, it's still good to be able to retain that detail, and sometimes you can lose that. So if you're exposed for the ambient light and then bring in a softbox that is a stop or two more light, you might burn out or whatever, just have contrast that's too high. And in this case, as you're looking at that, it would be the viewer's right. I want to make sure people know, if you're looking at this photograph, the right-hand side, the longer hair, that's the light, the side that the light is on. And the ambient light was really pretty. It lit most of the mask of her face, but it caused raccoon eyes, those dark eyes. It just wasn't pleasing. So that softbox really should be almost like good retouching. You shouldn't go, wow, look at that flash. Look at that off-camera flash. It should mix well enough. And this comes from you practicing and learning how to measure the lights and how to run the lights, because they all are adjustable. But once you've got your exposure, you can figure out where that softbox should be set. Take a couple tests. And again, don't do this with your clients. Do your testing well beforehand. Make sure you know what you're doing so that your client isn't sitting there while you're learning. You're with a professional, you want to keep things rolling and instill confidence that that's good. And even if you take a couple and they're off, don't ever go, oh, that's not right. That's a little off subject here, but always be positive and say, oh, this is going to be gorgeous. Let me just adjust this a little bit, and you can work from there.
So Tom, just a question for you, for anyone that might be wondering. So and this might be a basic question, it might not be, but I don't like to leave questions unanswered. How do you decide what you're going to be determining the exposure by? How do you determine whether you're going to be doing it from the flash, the off-camera flash main light, or if you're going to be doing it from the ambient light? How do you determine that?
That Charles Lewis raised one smart boy. And I'll tell you why. That is one of the, I guess you'd call it the artistic decision you have to make. Once you get into an area, because we pick the background and we know where we want our subject to be, and we pick an area that has an overhang with good ambient lighting, that even if you didn't have an off-camera flash, it might make a acceptable or close to acceptable photograph. And this is with open sky. The sun is kind of behind the trees, those situations where you're not direct sun. So once you're in that location, you can make the decision, do I want to let this light look like this and just use the ambient light as the main light source, that open sky, and use my off-camera flash to fill in the shadows a little bit, maybe a stop or two under, so that we don't have harsh lighting or too contrasty lighting. In the other situation, it would be, the light here is beautiful, but if I bring in my softbox and use it as my main light and use that ambient light as fill, it's going to have more of a studio-like quality that you can't achieve, that a lot of your clients can't achieve. So that comes down to personal taste in some ways, what your style is. Sometimes I'll do a session. I photograph seniors, really a lot of them right this time of year, and it's a mix. I have a mix of ambient light with no off-camera flash. There's certain situations that I'm just good at picking those out that look beautiful, and then there's others where I could use a little help. I'm going to put a little fill light in there, or I'd like to have that softbox be the key light. In this case, the softbox is more the key light or the main light. That's why I chose to expose for that. So once you get used to using your tools, and learning how they work, you can see how they affect the look of your photograph, and try all three on a subject: ambient, fill, and key light, and see what you like best.
All right, nice. Well, here we're still talking about the flashes with these small soft boxes on them. What do you want to talk about here?
Yeah, so this is a good example. This is the one on the left is available light, perfectly acceptable in most cases. This is a place near the client's home, and the open sky was nice, and we even kind of got some light in the eyes, so it would be okay and acceptable. But I prefer to have just a little more modeling on the face and on the mask of the face to show up. So the middle one shows that if we turn that flash up too high, and instead of being the fill light, it becomes the main light. It overpowers the ambient light, and you can see it leaves shadows, but also it's just not flattering to the face. There's no dimension to the face. It doesn't have any roundness. It's just a shadow under the chin, and the skin is not flattering. So on the right, I've brought that back down in exposure, so the key light, or the main light on the softbox on the stand, is about 45 degrees up and 45 degrees to my left, in this case, of the camera, to give us almost a studio-like modeling on the face. So we still have a good base ambient exposure, and then I expose for that one stop higher key light or softbox, which is off to that left. And I just, comparing the total left to the far right, I just feels like it fills in the shadows a little more. It's just a little less harsh, and also it adds catch lights that are more flattering.
Nice, very nice. All right, here still again talking about the larger flash units. Smaller soft boxes or so. Lighting ratio, the difference between the main light and the ambient light can be varied for different looks. Talk about this image here.
Yeah, this is just another example of I use the softbox as the key or as the main light source. It's very subtle because you could shut it off and still have probably an okay exposure. I wasn't doing this particular photograph with this program in mind, or I'd have a before and after. I usually toss the ones that are mistakes or that are befores, so I didn't have as many as I'd like because there's a lot of pullbacks that would probably be helpful. But as you can see, just from the slight shadow under the nose, the camera, the softbox is again 45 degrees above, in this case to my right, camera right, and creating catch lights in the eyes. The ambient light is lighting everything else, but the exposure is based on what that softbox would be. And this was a case, this girl really liked the sneakers there that have the daisies, or those daisies, sunflowers on them. So she was like, can you get my sneakers in this? And it was really pretty cute. But exposing for that area and then creating that next exposure up for the softbox just gives us a next step look. And her mom actually took some, mind if I take a few? They have me in most of them, which I don't like. But so she showed me, oh, this is going to be really cute. It looked nothing like that. So, she goes, I can't do what you're doing, but this is what I took just for fun, So it does make a difference.
All right.
That last one with the girl in the yellow, that's what I did. 99% of my time, I used the flash, softbox, or big umbrella as a main light. And then the ambient light becomes the fill light, if you will.
Yep.
And it's very pleasing as long as you don't overpower it. It's very pleasing, gives good direction of light. So I agree 100% with what Tom said.
And I learned a lot of that from Chuck Lewis many years ago when I started, and said, why does his work look so darn good? And mine isn't quite making it. So I studied tons of Chuck Lewis lighting diagrams and posing diagrams over the years, and have made a ton of money because of that.
Yeah, you're creating photographs that your target market loves. Now, here you talk about how, again, most of the time the off-camera flash is used as the main light, the primary source of light, with the available light coming from the ambient light in the area. Oftentimes it can be backlighting. I'm going to guess, Tom, that photograph right behind you to your left, that's in the room there with you. Your left, your other left. Is that, am I doing the right side? I don't know. The one of the girl. Yes, there we go. There we go. Yeah, I'm guessing that that one, the ambient light, looks like it was an awful lot of separation lighting being used there, and that's really nice. Did you use an off-camera flash as supplemental lighting for that one?
I did. We had to get some light under that brim. The mom owns a beautiful bed and breakfast business down on the coast of Maine, Southwest Harbor, Maine. This was a few years ago. I've actually done this girl's senior portraits. But she said she loves, and there was only a certain time of year that these flowers, they're like black-eyed Susans. So we went down, and unfortunately, because of her business, we had to work time of day where I was hoping for a little overcast, and it was pretty sunny. But with her back to the sun, and a little bit of fill to fill in that face under the brim. It turned out I actually won an award for this, and this is on her wall for years in her business as well. She's invested in like a 40 by 40, I think it was. People would just come in, whoa, where'd you get that? And I'd go down there and do portraits of people that were visiting from out of state because they love that so much. But that definitely needed some fill light.
Fantastic. And here you mentioned, kind of in a similar vein that you try to find areas that have excellent available light already, and then decide whether to use the off-camera flash as the main light, the key light, fill, even, I don't know if you ever have to use a off-camera flash as separation light. You never know, I guess. But in these images here, it says you used the available light, the open sky, underneath an overhanging tree, so you're not getting a harsh direct source of light as your main light source, and then used handheld flash to fill in the shadows gently. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, with children, they move around a lot. I don't know if you've noticed that. So a lot of times when you bring out the big clunky light stand with this beautiful softbox and say, I am going to make some beautiful portraits. Where's the child? They just ran away. Oh, no. And you're running around like, with this thing in your hand, like the villagers running with torches in their hands after the Frankenstein. So forget that. That's why with children particularly, I like to use the handheld as a fill light because it allows me to move around with them. I still will look for areas with good lighting. And both of these, without my fill light, they would have been okay. I mean, the exposure on the face was nice, but in this case, the exposure is made for the highlight side of their face where the open sky is hitting them. And then the fill light is usually one stop less, just enough to open up those shadows a little bit. And again, it's like cooking. Do it to taste. I have some high school senior portraits where, especially with the guys, they're golfing or they have their cars and get this real dramatic look. I might crank that main light way up or use the ambient light way up and have the fill be very low so that we have a real contrast of 3 or 4 stops. But that's a more dramatic effect. 99% of what I do, I want to have this nice, soft 3-to-1 lighting ratio where there's a stop more in the key light than there is in the fill light, or a stop and a half maybe. So in both cases, just tree overhang, found the light. You got to get good at looking for that light. And if you can find that light, then it's almost magic. You're like, wow, that's the sweet spot. And I want to point out, you don't see any other than the little boy. There's a little sun coming through the trees in the portrait on the right, but just enough so that it was a little hot exposure on the hair, but it's pleasing because they loved they said, oh, his hair gets so shiny and light in the summer. And we just did this one recently.
And that looks, I mean, to look at that, that's beautifully lit. It looks like it could have been lit in a studio. Right. I mean, you have so much control over that light, despite the fact that most of that is Mother Nature, But the way you're supplementing it with the other things you're doing, and the position of their body, and where the sun is in the sky, and the tree overhead to break that up, just so beautifully done. And that's what makes the difference, folks. Take a look at that close up. This is what makes the difference.
And Todd,
professional photographs and photographs that would be just taken by somebody with their smartphone.
If I may hop in, interject real quickly, I want to let people know there's always opportunities. There was a large family group that I was photographing, and this little guy, he was the latest addition. He's a year old here. He's sitting on the lap in the family portraits of grandma. Everybody's just adoring him. So I'm like, ding, 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 ding. So we did grandmother and grandfather, did all the little breakdowns, but I said, that little bench over there, oh, he loves, let's put him down there. This was I don't know if we need a number, but we'll say this was a 3-figure, very close to a 4-figure sale of just him. Okay, it just like added way big time onto the family portrait group because everybody wanted this too. At the projection, they cried. Oh my gosh, we've never had him photographed alone. We didn't think you'd do that with a family. No problem, we did it anyway. He was terrific. So don't overlook those opportunities. Just keep your eyes off the lighting. That lighting matched what theirs was, so it looks good on the wall with their big family group.
All right, how about these images here?
I don't know who that old guy is there, but this is a good example of where I had to climb down some muddy hills, so I dressed rather casually that day. And we had a series of weather of 99, feel like 100 degrees in Maine here for several weeks. So I was dressed down a bit as best I could to survive that. But we're down the side of this hill, which is near the client's home. Matter of fact, it's near a cow pasture, and the cows kept coming by and watching us. And I got a photograph of it, which they loved. But I found an overhanging area and turned her head and saw that light just appear on her face. And it was just a beautiful study of her face. She smiled a lot, but I just loved this, her eyelashes and everything. And that's pretty much straight out of the camera right there. I used a 200 millimeter lens, all wide open, so we had some shallow depth of field. But I added just a little tiny bit of, it might have been 2 stops under, of fill, so that her hair on our left, her right, had a little bit more detail. And she was just holding her hands like that, and she's just standing there. I think she was looking at the cows or the sky. And I just started talking to her and said, keep looking where you're looking. And it was very gentle. Her mother, I mean, I'm talking a downburst of tears when she saw this. And I put it on Facebook. I photographed this girl when she was 3 months old. And her mother's like, you've been with us all this time. I've waited years for this, and you've fulfilled what I wanted and then some. So that's a good example. Find that great light and then decide whether you want to fill it in or use it as an ambient light.
Yeah, and here's another couple of examples of, handheld flash, fill in the shadows, ambient light still being the main source of light. Let's take a close-up look at that one.
Yeah, a lot of students love me to do kind of urban photography, which is the city of Bangor, Maine. Population 35,000. Salute, remember hee-haw? But it's for us, that's a big city. But there's a lot of buildings, a lot of history downtown. So a lot of them love the texture, and we go around to different buildings and doorways. So this mom happened to work at a local bank. The girl on the left, her mother worked at this bank. So she says, I always wanted my daughter photographed in the doorway of Bangor Savings Bank. So we worked in and around this 1850 building that had some neat architecture. But this one, the ambient light pretty much took care of it. It was standing in a doorway. I just popped a little bit of that fill flash in to fill in the shadows on the other side, which would be our left viewing. Same thing with the girl laying on the ground. And again, this is an example of, this girl really loved these flowers. This is off her back porch, and the mother goes, can you use these? And there was an overhang, but the overhang, it was reverse. I would have turned her the other way because the open sky was kind of behind her. And I'm like, ruh-roh, well, we could tear up those flowers. But instead, I went up on the porch, climbed over some furniture, and did the best I could to use to use my flash to create a main light on her face that would match the light behind her. That was because her face was facing this dark porch, really. There's a little bit coming in and hitting her nose and so forth. So you could see where, I just handheld this portable flash because there was no way I was getting my flash on the stand up there, crawling through there and so forth. It's nice if you can have an assistant. Well, I don't always have one with me when I'm doing photography, particularly seniors and babies. So you got to do what you got to do. And but they love this, and this is just what the mother was looking for. She wanted those flowers, soft background, the whole things that we always talk about doing. But the lighting really was key here because the one on the left was just, that wouldn't have been acceptable.
Now, Tom, I got to ask you a question here. So the finished portrait here, the one on our right there. There's a catch light there in her eyes. What is that? So what is that catch light? Is that from the flash?
It would have been. It was kind of weak. There's a couple things I want to say. This is kind of more out of the camera. In a finished portrait, I would go in, and because we don't have a modeling light outside to tell what the flash is going to do, sometimes you get problems. One is the shadow that's created next to her eye socket. Her hair should have come back a little bit. And usually I'm constantly, gently saying, oh, let's fix your hair. Can you pull it? Perfect. In this case, we'd taken a few. It was fine. Then on this one, which I really like the expression, of course, it fell forward a little. So I would go in Photoshop and fix that in 2 minutes. I added that. The catch light that was in there was kind of harsh looking because it's my handheld. And because of the situation, I had it, even though I had the diffusion dome on it, it was pointed directly at her. And so I wasn't crazy about the look of the catch light. So I actually retouched that. It's exactly where the catch light was because I held the camera, I had the flash up to my left, her right, and up high enough to get the catch light up in that area. But I went in and just softened it up a little bit.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, how long would you say that took you to do, to just do that catch light?
Yeah, I do it all the time because a lot of times catch lights aren't exactly what I want, so I'll soften them up a little bit or something, or change the shape. But it really adds that sparkle we gotta have. Or sometimes the handheld flash, if I'm really working, it's a little high and it's in the wrong spot, so I'll just move it over.
For sure. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about accessories. The light stands, battery packs, small weight for the light stand. Okay, coming again from the cinematography world, shot bags, or what we call them, not shot in the naughty word. They're called shot bags because they used to be filled with buckshot.
Right.
Now, oftentimes now they're filled with sand, and they're sandbags. Making sure that your lights are nice and secure, not only for the safety of the light themselves, but the safety of a child or an animal runs by it. They have a pet and hits it and it falls down and it hurts somebody. Very important. So let's talk about the importance of these accessories.
Yeah, so again, this is the one that I use with larger groups and with ones requiring much more power because it's the White Lightning. There are so many brands. The trigger that's on this is made by a company called Neewer, but there's a million different brands. And basically, it's a remote radio trigger that triggers the flash when I do the exposure. The battery pack is hooked to the stand there. Now, that is kind of heavy enough that 99% of the time, that's what I use as the weight. Sometimes I clip it onto the very bottom, so it really has a good center of gravity. But the point I wanted to show here is that that's not the most portable setup. It's what I use, though, and I call it sometimes my workout routine. So, when I'm done doing a photography session, I'm like, man, I felt that. I carried that around. So that's why I try to have 2 or 3 different things in the arsenal. The Alien Bees are a little lighter than that, but I love this White Lightning. It's got plenty of guts to cover just about anything. You mentioned something about multiple light sources. There are occasions, and I didn't want to get into this too much because it's a little more advanced theory. There are ways to set up 3 or 4 separation light, main light, key light outside with family groups and give this nice kiss of light off the edges or off just like in the studio. It's a little more complex setup, and the average client may or may not notice that. So I make sure that we at least get the good base exposure. If I've got the time or the wherewithal, I think it'll work. I'll set up a couple kicker lights as well that are fired remotely too. But you don't need to do that at this point. Just get what we're talking about right now going, and you'll see things improve right away. And then here's your light stand with those little bags. I had one that had little weights in it, one that came with sand in it and so forth. And it's really just designed so that inevitably, if you don't use that, the wind is going to come up, and I can't tell you the number of soft boxes that end up going, and people, you hear this big collective, as it's going over, and you go to grab it, and you don't quite get it. People are like, is that thing going to be okay? And you're like, it's fine. And it's crumpled up like, aluminum foil. You cry later. They're fortunately not that expensive, or you can bend them back into shape. So, but using weights or something to hold those into place will save you a lot of that frustration.
Now let's take a look at some examples here. And if you want to talk about each of these mainly from a standpoint of how the off-camera flash is utilized and how it's showcased here.
Yeah, this young lady we just photographed outside. You can see the catch lights there. That's from a soft box. It's to our left, her right, and it's a little lower, but she had a fairly trim face, so the lighting, I wasn't trying to do any real corrective lighting. I just wanted those gorgeous eyes to show, and she had this flawless complexion. I mean, the retouchers, took the day off with this young lady. She's just gorgeous, but that soft light really helps to do that. So this was just, near a fence post, and we were just hanging around, and I love these close-up poses, and that one ended up, Dad is an attorney, and that ended up on his wall in both home and at his business. He had another one. This is my daughter, who I have senior portrait-itis because this year it's time for her senior portraits. And I will tell you, she had me do a winter one, a spring one. This is her summer one. And then we're doing one in the fall when the leaves change. She's a very demanding client, but I'm sending her a big bill. But anyway, this is pretty much almost totally available light. Looking off, the open sky was there. She'd seen something where she liked that profile and wanted to show her hair and off and so forth. So this was tree overhang behind. You can see the sun was coming in behind those trees. Very, very, very little fill, handheld fill on this, just to give a little shadow reduction on the cheeks and on her hair there. But this was longer lens, isolated her face, softened the background. Pretty much fell into place. This one is an example of I probably overdid it a little, but the parents have this on their wall at home, so you can get away with some. It was kind of a dim, overcast day. There wasn't a lot of sparkle going on. It was the only day he could work with us. It was about to rain, and so that's my softbox. Excuse me, no, it's not. That is my handheld flash, which can be a little harsher to create the exposure. But there are times when I will do this, look at it and go, okay, if I don't like that, we can deal with it later, and I'll readjust the lighting because you can obviously change things on the fly. But I thought it was saleable enough, and it ended up being the one that ended up on their wall. This is a class of 23 high school senior. This was a softbox out in the field. So this was on a stand, a softbox, beautiful area, and we were able to just light her eyes. The ambient light is a little hot here overhead. And if you want to get into more advanced lighting, there are gobos you can put over their head to get rid of some of the shadows on their face, all kinds of stuff you can do. But I'm trying to address here more somebody just starting out or somebody that's tired of lugging a lot of stuff around. You can still get very saleable, beautiful portraits if you're just a little more careful about it. And this one, again, was on their wall. This young lady who was very cool, anybody that brings in musical instruments and things, and she said, I want to let people know that I'm outstanding in my field. So I put her out. Yes, thank you very much. I did cheat a little bit. The sun was behind the trees, but it wasn't really doing what I wanted. This was near her home. And she said, a lot of times I just come out here and think I think about music. So I had a little sun flare later on post in that. But she just wanted a saleable, something that showed this. Overcast sky in front of her, or fairly cloudy, softbox just to come in and light the face. Not real fancy lighting, but they loved it. That ended up on the wall as well.
And that's an important point on our other video that we're releasing on the Online Vault this month for our members. We talked about the importance of creating photographs. It was just a comment made during the video. The importance of creating photographs that are meaningful to the client.
Right.
That are meaningful to your target market. And what you said was this was a place that she went. This was a location that was meaningful to her. How much more is this photograph going to mean to her and her family than if you had done it against a painted background in a photography studio? That means nothing to anyone but yourself. So such an important point. Again, I'm guessing, incorporating props, musical instruments, things that are important to the client. So wonderful. How about this image here?
Same thing. This gentleman was a high school senior a few years ago. Would I have liked to have had a brown, orange, rust, some other sweater on him? Yes. I wasn't crazy about the shirt, but I brought this on for example of lighting, so we'll forget that for now. And this was backlit, obviously, in the fall. They really wanted fall time. There was not a cloud in the sky, and it was a time of day that it was a struggle to find a place the sun wasn't hitting. And that's the general rule I like to give people is if the sun is striking your subject anywhere on skin, move them. I can do backlighting on hair and get away with it, but if your subject is facing the sun and squinting or having those hot spots on the skin, that's not good because it's hard to correct for that.
And this one you can kind of tell, and I know Tom won't mind me kind of putting him on the spot here, that you can tell this one's not quite it's a little more flat lighting. You can see that you were struggling just a little bit with where can I get him where that light isn't going to be super harsh, where it's not going to be coming from one spot, so it's a little bit more flat than you might have typically liked, right?
Right. And I will say again, my client was behind me with her iPhone, I think it was a 9 at that point, and taking all these silhouettes. She's like, mine aren't coming out very good because the backlighting was so overpowering. And I'm like, those are perfect. And so when she saw mine, she's like, it was that box thing you had on the stand, wasn't it? I said, well, that does help. But yeah, I just basically had a soft box up to our left, his right coming in because I knew he wanted looking in the camera, playing the flute, and I said, okay, we'll dispense with goofing around too much here.
And again, what the client wants and having something that's connective to them is better than having the absolute perfect lighting every single time. Of course, we want to try and get everything as perfect as we possibly can.
This is down by a place called the Kenduskeag River in Bangor, Maine, across the river from me. A lot of students have me take them. It's a beautiful park. And the mom and dad are doctors, and they used to take their children down to this park and have picnics on these rocks. So it meant a lot to them. I said, and they said, we've always, their home is not far from there. They have a beautiful home, but they said, we've always liked hanging down here, and the kids would play and everything. And it's a rushing stream, so it wasn't like they jumped in the water, but they'd sit on the rocks and you couldn't fish, but they just loved it. So we took this young man down there, and but again, because of the kind of treacherous walking on rocks and me balancing, hoping, okay, if I go in the water, I'm going to throw the cameras to you, I told the dad. He goes, okay. I said, I can dry off. The cameras I worry about. So I just used the handheld flash there, found an overhang near that water, and that lights the part of his face that's the lightest part. That's the open sky. And then my fill flash came in at a stop under to take care of the shadow side of his face. It's kind of... I don't know what you call it, because we take more time. I don't want to say like hit and run type thing. I don't want to give it a negative connotation. I take time to think about this, and I've done this 100 times, so I kind of already know where we're at. But I also want to make sure that we're not fumbling while this person is standing there going, what should I set this at? You already kind of have an idea where to start, and that comes from practicing.
Fantastic. Wow, my goodness, the time has flown. I can't. That feels like we've been only on here for like 15 minutes, and it's been it's been over 45 minutes. So Tom, wonderful stuff. Thank you for sharing everything that you've shared here. I hope that our members realize how powerful this is, and we really wanted to get in as deep and into the details as we could. But Tom, why don't you give us some final thoughts here, and how these final thoughts apply directly to the stuff that you've been talking about today, specifically with off-camera flash.
Yeah, if you've watched this today and said, I don't do any of these things, that's okay. I didn't either. So take one small step right now to implement what you discovered here. That's the first step, because it's no good to you if you don't do it. Successful photographers like you take action and do things that the other photographers won't do. And I hear that a lot. Oh, it's too much work. I don't want to bother. It'll take me too long. It'll pay off. Trust me. And you'll be more proud of what you're producing, and you'll produce things that your clients can't do. You have to think differently. And that's why we talk so much about doing things that other photographers refuse to do. And one is taking that step to learn not just available light, but how to augment that and take it to the next level. So think differently, think out of the box, and think differently from other photographers, and continue to take advice from those who are where you want to be, which is us. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I love consistency. I like knowing when a client comes in that even though there's some variables, they're going to get something great, because I know what I'm doing usually. So the only variable is if, the baby cries, the dog runs off, there's lightning, you can't control those things. But I'm going to be consistent and produce something beautiful, because that's why they came to me. And part of that is knowing how to do lighting properly.
Yep. And then last but not least, certainly visit the Photographer's Online Vault regularly. Tom has a whole bunch of programs on there on just about anything you can imagine. And if he doesn't have them on there, we have them on there. We pride ourselves in having a location for photographers where, regardless of what your question is, it's probably answered, and in great detail, in something on the Online Vault. So visit the Photographer's Online Vault regularly, look at what's being added, but also use that search bar to search for any specific challenges that you might be having in your photography business. Tom, thank you again so much. I hope
pleasure.
that our members enjoyed this program. Dad, I'm going to turn it over to you for any last-minute thoughts that you might have, and then Tom, we'll let you wrap up for the day.
Well, Tom, I just want to thank you for taking the time and putting all the work into this to present these principles. Your work is beautiful. Your lighting is just exquisite. It's so complimentary to your clients. You're very consistent. I'm really pleased with this program. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And that's an honor coming from you, Chuck, since a lot of what you saw there, I have taken and learned from you many decades ago. So,
thank you.
If you're watching this again, you may, depending on where you are, some of you may be old pros like us, some of you, but you're looking to freshen things up, or you're just starting, or you're somewhere in the middle. You could do these things. That's what we're here for. We're glad to help you. That's what the Online Vault is here. So take action. Think, what little step can I do differently today, maybe to change my photography and take it to that next level. And we'll be here to help you and watch your success as you grow. Thank you for being here.
We sure will. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Tom and Dad, for all your contributing here, as always. And we'll talk to you again on our next members-only video. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.